This is your time to let go. A journey of calm and serenity. Follow the rhythm of my voice into deep rest, with every note of the music, designed with soothing frequencies, allowing your body, mind, and soul to drift into perfect relaxation. And now take a deep breath in and out and in and out. The morning begins like a held breath. A thin fog lies across the meadows, caught in the low dips of the land. Dew glistens on the stalks of wheat that somehow still stand after weeks of bombing and marching boots. The sun has not yet burned through the haze, and every color in the world seems muted, gray, pale green, the brown of churned soil. Only the faint echo of distant artillery reminds anyone that the world is at war. In a narrow dirt lane, hidden beneath the branches of alder trees, 3 TKS tankettes idle in silence. Their engines tick softly, cooling metal popping like a heartbeat. Inside the lead machine sits Section Commander Edmund Roman Orlik, 24 years old, his uniform creased and stained with oil. His hands rest on the cold rim of the periscope. His eyes are red from nights without sleep. The TKS is barely larger than a family car, a steel box on tracks. Inside, space is so tight that when Orlik turns his head, his shoulder bumps the gun breech. Beside him, the driver, Corporal Roman Rogoz, grips the small steering levers, his knuckles white. Neither man speaks. The engine's low growl is their only companion. Outside, a crow caws once, then again, then takes flight toward the forest. Its wings beat through the fog. Orlik follows it with his eyes until it vanishes. He knows what that silence means. Somewhere, something has disturbed the bird. He reaches for the field map folded beside his knee. Pencil marks circle the crossroads of Pociecha, a place now whispered about in the scattered Polish lines as a point of danger where German patrols sweep through like wolves, testing a fence. Roman, Orlik says quietly. His driver answers with a grunt. Cut the engine. The sound dies. What follows is a stillness so thick it presses on the eardrums. For a long half-minute, there is nothing. Then, faintly, the ground begins to tremble. Clank, clank, clank. Orlik freezes. That rhythm, steady, metallic, heavy, is unmistakable. Tanks. He raises a hand, signaling the other 2 TKS crews behind him to hold. From the muffled distance comes the low thunder of engines, multiple tracks grinding against earth and stone. The sound is approaching fast. From the right, beyond the line of birch trees that guard the fields, enemy armor. Orlik whispers into his throat mic. 200 meters, maybe less. His heartbeat quickens, but his voice remains steady. The tiny machines behind him answer with a click of acknowledgement. 2 of them carry only machine guns useless against heavy armor. His alone mounts the 20mm autocannon that can, if placed perfectly, pierce a German tank's side. He knows at once what must be done. Machine gun tankettes, stay back in cover, he orders. Do not reveal yourselves. It's up to me. Rogos nods silently and restarts the little engine. The noise feels painfully loud in the quiet field. The TKS lurches forward, bouncing violently as its narrow tracks bite into the wet ground. Branches scrape against the armor. Weeds whip the sides like lashes. Inside, every jolt slams the men against cold steel. But Orlik doesn't flinch. He's focused on the faint dirt road ahead, the route that leads to the crossroads. They push through a tangle of brush until the trees thin. Ahead, a gentle rise overlooks the junction, a perfect ambush point. Rogos brings the TKS to a halt behind a bush thick with yellowing leaves. The engine drops to an idle hum. Through his periscope, Orlik scans the open ground. The crossroads lies empty, but dust rises faintly on the far road. Then he hears it again, the grinding of gears, the crunch of metal treads. The Germans are close. He adjusts the elevation on his cannon and peers through the narrow sight slit. He can feel the sweat on his temples despite the chill. His right hand rests on the trigger handle. His left steadies the gun. In the cramped silence, even his breathing sounds too loud. From behind the trees on the far side of the field, the first Panzer emerges, a massive Panzer IV-B. Its armor plates gleaming dull gray under the morning light. The machine rumbles forward, its commander buttoned up inside, oblivious to the threat crouched in the grass. Behind it, two smaller Panzer 35 follow, their guns sweeping lazily left and right. Inside the lead tank rides platoon commander Victor IV Albrecht von Ratibor, the heir to an old German noble line. He sits proud even in the iron cage of war, unaware that his name will soon be carved into a different history. The convoy slows at the crossroads. Von Ratibor raises his hand to his driver. "Niemand here," he says through the intercom. "Forward." Orlik's breath catches. The German commander's voice is faint through the armor, but he hears it clear enough. They don't know he's there. He waits, finger resting lightly on the trigger. The Panzer's turret turns slightly, showing the white cross on its side, the perfect target. Now, he squeezes the trigger. A violent crack explodes inside the tiny cabin. The 20mm autocannon kicks like a beast. Through the sight, Orlik watches the tracers streak across the air and strike the Panzer's turret square on the cross. The shell punches through the armor with a flash and disappears inside. Half a second later, smoke bursts from the turret's hatches. The German tank shudders to a halt. A man's scream carries faintly across the open field. The hatches fling open, and two crewmen scramble out, choking and panicked. "Reload!" Orlik snaps. Rogos slams another 5-round magazine into the gun. From behind the wreck, the remaining two Panzers appear, their turrets already turning toward the Polish position. The ambush has been discovered. "Reverse!" Orlik shouts. The TKS jolts backward into the brush just as shells tear through the air above them. Dirt and leaves erupt in showers around the little tankette. Each explosion feels like the world being ripped apart. "Stop!" Orlik orders. "Hold here." He adjusts his sights again. One of the Panzer 35 crawls forward, its gray hull glinting through the smoke of its fallen comrade. Orlik aims for the side armor, the one weak point, and fires. The first shot ricochets. The second dents the plate. The third punches through. Inside the German machine, something detonates. A muffled boom shakes the ground. Flames burst from the turret ring, and the tank lurches to a stop, belching black smoke into the sky. The second 35 jerks sideways, its gun barking blindly toward the forest. Shells whistle through branches. One strikes a tree just meters away, showering the TKS with splinters. "Still missed us," Rogos mutters under his breath, half in awe, half in disbelief. Orlik exhales slowly, steadying his nerves. "We're not done yet," he says. Through the drifting smoke, he can see the last Panzer beginning to retreat, turning its turret as it reverses down the road toward the village. They think the Polish tanks are more numerous than they are. He places a hand on his driver's shoulder. "We chase." The little TKS roars back to life, disappearing into the mist of war. The smoke from the burning Panzer 4B drifts lazily over the fields, mixing with the mist of the September morning. The air tastes of metal and ash. Somewhere in the distance, crows take flight, startled by the sudden eruption of war in what had been a quiet Polish valley only moments ago. Inside his TKS, Commander Edmund Orlik reloads the 20mm autocannon. 5 shells click into the magazine with a sharp metallic rhythm. He exhales slowly. "Driver, stay low," he mutters. "Don't show the hull." His driver, Roman Jablonski, wipes sweat from his brow despite the cold. "They'll come for us now, sir." "They will," Orlik answers, "but we'll be waiting." He peers through the sight again. Through the shifting fog, the 2 remaining Panzer 35 **S come into view. Their treads chew the earth methodically, black mud spraying from beneath the wheels. The first moves toward the wrecked Panzer IV, cautious yet determined. Inside the lead 35, Lieutenant Kurt Schneider grips his periscope. "That shot came from the left. Search the tree line." His gunner adjusts the turret. "I see nothing, Herr Lieutenant. Maybe they fled. If you were Tavar." "Nein," Schneider growls. "No Polish tank can punch through a Panzer IV. They're here hiding." He gives the order. "Fire into the trees." The 35T's gun erupts with thunder. The shell slices into the brush where Orlik's TKS had been seconds ago, exploding in a shower of soil and branches. Orlik clenches his jaw as the concussion shakes their small machine. He pats the steel wall affectionately. "Good girl, hold together." Another shell tears past, missing again. "Stop!" Orlik shouts. The TKS halts. He swings the gun back toward the Germans, his hands steady, his breath shallow. The first Panzer has turned slightly to the right, its side armor exposed. A weakness. Orlik fires. One shell, then another, then another. Clang, clang, crack. The third shot finds its mark. The 20mm penetrates the side plate, and a burst of flame blossoms from the Panzer's engine deck. For a heartbeat, the tank lurches forward, then stops dead, smoke pouring from its hatches. Hit confirmed. Jablonski breathes. The second Panzer 35, undeterred, swings around the burning wreck. Its cannon flashes. The shot whistles overhead, tearing through branches above Orlik's tankette. Leaves rain down like confetti. Driver, reverse, zigzag. The little TKS dances backward, bouncing over roots and ruts. Another shell smashes into the earth just ahead, filling the compartment with dirt and dust. "Closer!" Orlik yells. "Get us closer into the trees!" They burst through the undergrowth and come to a sudden stop. The German tank, unable to lower its gun far enough, loses sight of them in the foliage. Orlik takes the opportunity. He swings the gun, lines up the crosshairs on the enemy's flank, and squeezes the trigger. A burst of 20 millimeters fire, then silence. For a moment, nothing happens. Then the German tank jerks violently. A second later, a muffled explosion rips through its hull. The hatch flies open, belching black smoke and tongues of flame. The last Panzer burns. Inside the TKS, Orlik and Jablonski stare at one another. Neither speaks. Their hands tremble not from fear, but from the release of it. Outside, the Polish countryside falls silent once more. Only the faint crackle of fire and the hiss of escaping steam fill the air. "Two down," Jablonski whispers. Orlik nods. One remains. He turns his gaze toward the horizon, where the distant rumble of another engine echoes faintly. The duel is not over. September 18th, 1939. Late morning. The smoke of 3 destroyed German Panzers drifts into the gray Polish sky. The fields of Posiecha lie scarred and trembling. The once green pastures now burned with black craters and shattered trees. The air smells of cordite, oil, and churned earth. Edmund Roman Orlik kneels beside his TKS, the short barrel of its 20 millimeters cannon still hot and ticking. He wipes soot from his cheek with a gloved hand. A lone gust of wind ripples through the tall grass, whispering between the empty helmets scattered around the wrecks. Jablonski peers from the hatch, his eyes wide and young. "They're done for, sir. 3 of them. My God, 3. Orlik doesn't answer. He stares at the smoldering hulk of the Panzer IV-B, its steel carcass split open like a wounded beast. In the distance, something stirs the faint hum of another engine. He straightens. No, not yet. One escaped. Jablonski blinks. The last 35, I thought. Orlik cuts him off. He's running, heading for Posiecha. If he reaches their column, they'll know we're here. He looks toward the tree line, a dense forest stretching northward, dark and wet from last night's rain. We can't let him. The 2 men climb back into the TKS. The hatch slams shut. Inside, the smell of oil, sweat, and metal is suffocating. Jablonski twists the ignition crank. The tiny Fiat engine coughs, then roars to life with a shrill mechanical growl. "Go," Orlik orders. The treads bite into the soil, and the small Polish tankette lurches forward its frame, rattling violently as it leaves the open field and dives into the forest. The forest run. Inside the fleeing Panzer 35, Lieutenant Schneider clings to the periscope. His voice trembles with fury and disbelief. 3 destroyed by one of those vermin. Get us out of here. Schnell. His driver presses the pedal. The tank surging down a narrow dirt path. Trees whipping by on both sides. Branches scrape the armor, and pine needles shower over the turret. Schneider mutters a prayer under his breath. If we can reach the village, they'll crush these cockroaches. Behind him, deep in the forest, the Polish TKS charges through the underbrush like an angry insect. The low growl of its motor merges with the rhythmic crash of tree limbs snapping beneath its treads. Inside, the noise is unbearable. Metal shrieking, gears grinding, the cannon clinking with each bounce. Orlik's eyes are glued to the sight slit, scanning for glimpses of gray steel between the trees. Faster, Roman! I'm pushing her as hard as she'll go, Jablonski shouts back, fighting the controls. The tankette leaps over a fallen branch, almost tipping on one side before slamming back down. Both men grunt as the shock throws them against the hull. Orlik reloads, his fingers steady despite the chaos. He pushes a fresh 5-round magazine into the autocannon and slaps it down with a metallic click. Outside, the forest opens briefly into a clearing. Tracks cut through the mud fresh and deep. He spots smoke curling through the trees ahead. There! He's just beyond the ridge. The chase continues. The little TKS leaps over roots and stones, branches scraping its armor like fingernails. Every few seconds, Orlik glances up, watching leaves flutter down, disturbed by the German tank's wake. The ambush. On the other side of the ridge, the Panzer 35 slows for a moment, trying to navigate a narrow bend in the forest road. Schneider shouts to his gunner, "Ready the cannon! If they follow, we'll finish them here!" But the forest betrays him. The engine noise of the Polish tankette echoes strangely, coming not from behind, but from the left flank. Was is das? The TKS bursts through a curtain of pine branches, mud flying from its tracks. Before the German gunner can traverse the turret, Orlik fires. The TH Oper. 520mm shells tear through the morning air. Sparks erupt across the Panzer's rear armor. One round punching clean through the engine grill. A gout of black smoke bursts out. Inside, Schneider feels the heat on his neck. "Get us out of here!" The driver slams the gear, but the tank lurches and stalls its engine, choking. Another burst follows, and flames begin to lick from the rear plates. The German crew throws open the hatches, leaping out into the dirt, coughing and covered in soot. Orlik waves his driver to a halt, steps out of the TKS, and draws his pistol. "Range du Gori!" Hands up! The 2 German soldiers freeze. One of them, his face streaked with ash, raises his hand slowly. The other looks back toward the burning Panzer, eyes full of disbelief. From within the wreck, a voice cries weakly in German. Schneider, wounded and pinned inside. Orlik lowers his weapon, runs forward, and climbs the smoking hull. The heat sears his boots, but he pulls at the hatch, forcing it open. Inside, Schneider lies slumped against the seat, his uniform smoldering. For a moment, both men lock eyes, one Polish, One German soldiers of two nations caught in a fire that neither truly wanted. Schneider whispers, Verdammte Kakerlaken. His voice fades with the smoke. Orlik pauses, breath heavy. He mutters quietly, almost to himself, then so be it. Cockroaches never die. He closes the hatch. Silence after the storm. The forest grows quiet again. The air hums only with the distant crackle of burning steel and the lonely song of birds returning to their trees. Sunlight breaks through the clouds, scattering golden rays across the wrecks, a haunting peace after chaos. Jablonski climbs from the TKS, his uniform streaked with mud and sweat. He looks around the destruction. 3 Panzers, Edmund, maybe 4, all gone. Orlik sits on the tank's edge, staring toward the horizon where Posiecha lies hidden beyond the trees. He speaks softly, more to the wind than to his comrade. They will come again, and we'll still be here. He pulls off his gloves and sets them beside him. The small tank ticks quietly as it cools, steam rising from its seams. For a long while, neither man says a word. The war, for this moment, has paused. Only the smell of burning oil and pine needles remains to remind them it ever happened. It is late September of 1939. The road to Warsaw is a trail of ruin and ash. Burned-out carts lie by the roadside, their wheels half sunk in mud, horses long dead beside them. The air reeks of smoke and oil. Columns of refugees shuffle along, faces pale, clutching what remains of their lives in torn cloth and trembling hands. Overhead, German planes drone endlessly, searching, circling like vultures. The sky itself feels hunted. Edmund Orlik sits inside his TKS tankette, his head pressed against the cold metal wall, listening to the engine's uneven heartbeat. His driver, Jablonski, grips the controls tightly, guiding the little machine through the wreckage-strewn road toward the city. Neither man speaks. They've said everything already, in glances, in silence, in the shared understanding that the fight is almost lost. Warsaw lies ahead, wrapped in smoke and thunder. When they crest a hill, the sight of the capital makes Orlik's chest tighten. The city burns in places, columns of smoke rising straight into the low-gray clouds. The church spires, once bright and proud, now pierced through veils of ash. The faint sound of artillery rolls, like distant thunder, steady, relentless, unending. Yet within that sound there is defiance, a rhythm that beats against the inevitable. The Poles are still fighting. They reach the outer defenses by dawn. Exhausted soldiers wave them in faces blackened by soot, uniforms torn, eyes hollow. The defenses are a patchwork of trenches, sandbags, overturned trams, and broken stone. Boys with rifles stand beside old men with pistols, every hand holding whatever weapon can still fire. Orlik climbs out of the TKS and looks at them. They stare back, half in disbelief that any tank, even a tiny one, still rolls under Polish colors. An officer approaches, salutes weakly, and says, "Lieutenant Orlik, you're the one from Posiecha, aren't you?" His voice carries a mixture of admiration and exhaustion. "They call you the Cockroach. Orlik nods once, too tired to smile. "What's the situation?" "Bad," the officer admits. "The Germans are pressing from the west and the south. We hold them here, at least for now. Every hour we delay them means more civilians can escape across the river." He gestures toward the distant skyline where the Vistula glimmers faintly under the smoke. "Can your machine still fight?" "She'll fight," Orlik says quietly. The officer nods. "Then take position near the tram depot. They'll come through there next." The TKS rattles forward, its tracks crunching over broken glass and spent shells. Around them, the ruins of Warsaw seem alive, every shattered window reflecting firelight, every wall breathing smoke. Civilians hurry past, clutching children and bundles, while soldiers dig new trenches right beside them. There is no clear line anymore between front and rear. The whole city is the battlefield. When the first German tanks appear, the sound comes before the sight, a low, rolling growl that makes the ground tremble. Orlik positions his tankette behind the wreck of a tram and waits. Jablonski wipes the sweat from his face, though the air is cold. "They're coming," he mutters. Through the periscope, Orlik sees them, dark shapes moving between the burning buildings, their silhouettes growing larger with every second. Panzer columns, flanked by infantry. The sound of their engines fills the street like an approaching storm. Orlik steadies his breath, adjusts the sight, and waits until the lead tank turns its turret. Then he fires. The 20mm cannon spits flame and noise, echoing off the buildings like thunder in a canyon. The shell strikes true, the German tank jerks violently, smoke bursting from its engine vents. Its crew scrambles out, running for cover as flames lick the steel. Orlik loads another magazine and fires again and again until the entire street is filled with noise and chaos. The Germans return fire. Shells crash into the tram depot, splintering wood and throwing shards of glass through the air. One explodes nearby, rocking the TKS so violently that Jablonski's helmet slams against the wall. He groans but keeps control. "Still alive," he mutters. They fire until the gun barrel glows faintly red. Around them, Polish infantry pour small arms fire into the street. Molotovs fly, smoke burns their throats. The Germans push forward with cold precision, each meter taken at terrible cost. Hours blur together. Orlik doesn't know how many tanks they've hit, how many shells they've dodged. He only knows that the sky has turned from gray to orange to black again. The city never sleeps. It only burns. By nightfall, they pull back into an alley to reload. The silence that follows is almost unbearable. Somewhere nearby, a church bell rings not as a call to prayer, but as a warning. Air raid. Orlik climbs out of the tank and looks up. The moon glows faintly behind the smoke, and high above, the droning begins again. Bombers. Dozens of them. The city below flickers as searchlights sweep the sky like frantic hands. Then, the bombs fall. The world erupts. Buildings shatter. Flames leap upward, and the air turns into fire. The blast knocks Orlik to the ground. He feels the heat on his face, the shock wave in his chest. When the dust clears, half the street is gone. The tram depot burns like a torch. Jablonski shouts his name through the smoke, dragging him back toward the TKS. They drive again, through debris, through screams, through streets that no longer exist. Every corner reveals another ruin, another ghost. But somehow, the little TKS keeps moving, like a living thing that refuses to die. In the early hours, they reach the old city. There, amid the ruins, the Polish defenders make their last stand. Orlik joins them. They position the TKS behind a fallen archway and fight through the night. Every shot they fire feels like defiance carved into history. By morning, the city is nearly silent. The gunfire has thinned. The defenders are scattered, many wounded, some gone. The radio crackles with the message no one wanted to hear: Warsaw will surrender. Orlik sits in the driver's seat, staring ahead. His face is streaked with soot and sweat, his eyes hollow but unbroken. Jablonski rests beside him, hands trembling. Neither says a word. When the order finally comes to lay down arms, Orlik removes his helmet slowly, sets it on his lap, and looks out at the ruined skyline. Smoke still rises where the heart of the city once beat. He feels the weight of silence pressing down, heavier than any shell. Was it worth it? Jablonski whispers. Orlik doesn't answer for a long time. Then, quietly, he says, "Every hour we held them back was an hour someone lived." He opens the hatch and steps into the gray morning light. The air smells of ash and metal and the faint sweetness of burning wood. Somewhere, through the haze, the first German soldiers appear, rifles raised, faces expressionless. Orlik raises his hands. He does not look away. The little TKS stands beside him, its armor scarred, its gun barrel bent, its tracks half buried in rubble but still upright, still proud. The war is over for now, but the legend of the cockroach has only just begun. It is the 1st of October, 1939, and the countryside outside Warsaw is draped in a heavy gray mist that seems to seep into every trench and ruin. Edmund Orlik walks cautiously along a narrow dirt road, the remains of his TKS tankette hidden behind a cluster of trees, its tracks half buried in mud, the cannon barrel still warm from yesterday's fight. The city is gone now, reduced to smoke and rubble, and the echoes of gunfire and screams still cling to the stones. Orlik's uniform is torn, his face streaked with soot and blood, and every step feels heavier than the last. He knows the Germans are searching for survivors, hunting anyone who fought, anyone who could tell a story of defiance, and he must remain unseen. For 3 days, he moves carefully through fields and orchards, avoiding main roads and keeping to the shadows of abandoned villages. Each house is a potential trap. Every chimney may conceal a rifle aimed at him. The autumn leaves, red and gold, crunch softly beneath his boots, betraying his presence if he is not careful. At night, he hides in the hollow of a tree or under a collapsed barn roof, listening to the distant rumble of tanks and trucks, the droning of aircraft overhead, the murmurs of men speaking in a language that is not his own. Hunger gnaws at his belly, cold at his bones. Yet he pushes forward, driven by a mixture of survival instinct and unbroken resolve. Finally, on the fourth night, Orlik reaches the banks of the Vistula River, swollen from early autumn rains. He pauses, listening to the water surge and swirl beneath the low-hanging mist, and knows that across the river lies potential safety, though not peace. For the enemy is everywhere. Using a fallen log as a makeshift bridge, he wades carefully, the cold water lapping at his waist, his clothes soaked and heavy. Halfway across, he freezes as the distant rumble of a motorboat carries over the water, the shadow of German soldiers scanning the opposite bank. He crouches low, breath held, heart hammering. The motorboat passes without notice, and he continues, emerging on the far shore with a sigh of relief that tastes of iron and mud. Once across, he finds himself in a forest that seems endless. The trees tall and ancient, their leaves whispering in the wind like the ghosts of the city he left behind. Here, Orlik meets members of the Polish underground, men and women who move with silence and precision, blending with the landscape, armed with pistols, knives, and an unyielding will. They lead him through hidden paths and safe houses, through villages untouched by the recent fighting, teaching him the ways of evasion, sabotage, and intelligence gathering. Orlik listens and learns, his knowledge of tanks and enemy tactics making him a valuable asset. Nights are spent plotting ambushes along supply routes, marking German patrols, and coordinating messages to units still fighting in pockets of resistance. Months pass. The landscape shifts from the browns and grays of autumn into the deep whites and muted blues of a harsh Polish winter. Snow blankets the forest floor, muffling footsteps and transforming familiar landmarks into disorienting vistas. Orlik moves with his comrades under the cover of darkness, striking supply depots, ambushing small patrols, and disappearing before reinforcements arrive. Each action carries risk. Each day could be his last. Yet with every successful strike, he feels a quiet vindication, a connection to the soldiers he lost, a continuation of the fight that began with the TKS tankette in Pociecha. By spring of 1940, Orlik's network has expanded, and the resistance grows bolder. He participates in coordinated efforts to relay intelligence to remaining Polish forces, to guide retreating units, and to sabotage German logistics. Bridges are collapsed, rail lines disrupted, vehicles destroyed, yet each act is a whisper against a thunderous occupation. In every village, he sees the cost of war, families displaced, children hungry, elders weeping for sons gone to battle or prison. Orlik carries their faces in his mind, a constant reminder that his struggle is not only for survival, but for the survival of his people. One warm morning in late May, as buds bloom stubbornly amid ruined fields, Orlik narrowly escapes a German raid on a hidden safe house. Shots ring out, smoke rises, and he ducks into the forest, feeling splinters of shrapnel graze his skin. Hours later, he emerges on a ridge overlooking a valley, where the first signs of spring bring life back to the land. Birds calling, streams gurgling, sunlight glinting on the snowmelt. For a moment, he allows himself to breathe, to feel hope, but it is fleeting, for the war is far from over, and each day brings new threats, new challenges. Orlik continues to fight in the shadows, moving from village to village, coordinating with other resistance groups, gathering supplies, and training new recruits in the art of stealth and improvisation. His legend spreads quietly among the people: the cockroach, who struck German tanks and vanished, who walks through fire and smoke unbroken, who refuses to surrender. Yet beneath the courage and skill lies a constant fear, the knowledge that capture could mean death, torture, or the destruction of everyone he seeks to protect. By the summer of 1940, Orlik's operations culminate in a daring sabotage of a German supply convoy. The attack, carefully planned and executed with precision. Explosions rock the countryside, vehicles overturned, supplies destroyed, and the enemy forced to retreat. The resistance celebrates quietly, sharing meager rations and stories by firelight, but the celebration is short. Every success brings heavier reprisals. Villages are burned, civilians executed, and the forest itself becomes a dangerous place, echoing with the cries of both predator and prey. Through it all, Edmund Orlik survives. Wounded, exhausted, yet unbroken, he continues to fight, moving like a shadow across the land, an embodiment of defiance. He witnesses comrades fall, faces familiar from earlier battles lost to the inexorable tide of war. Yet each loss steels his resolve. He carries the weight of a nation on his shoulders, the memory of his victories in Posiecha and Sierakov, and the hope that one day Poland will rise again. It is the autumn of 1940, and the forests and villages of Poland bear the scars of relentless war. Edmund Orlik moves like a ghost through the trees, his TKS tankette long gone, but the lessons of its speed and stealth ingrained in his mind. The ground is littered with abandoned equipment, destroyed vehicles, and the silent bodies of men and women who could not escape the brutal occupation. Orlik's face is lined with soot, fatigue, and the weight of countless battles, yet his eyes burn with the same unyielding determination that drove him in Posiecha. Each day is a careful dance of survival and defiance. Each village a maze of danger and opportunity, and each patrol by the enemy a test of skill and nerve. One bitter morning, frost clinging to the branches and the earth hardened by cold, Orlik leads a small band of resistance fighters to intercept a German convoy carrying weapons and ammunition. They move quietly, blending into the shadows, whispering instructions in hushed tones. Orlik recalls every maneuver, every ambush tactic, and every feint that allowed him to survive against armored panzer machines. The convoy rolls in, unaware of the silent predators waiting in the woods. Orlik signals his men, and the attack begins. A series of carefully placed explosives tear through wheels and chassis, gunfire erupts, and chaos descends upon the Germans. Vehicles burn, Soldiers flee in disarray, and the resistance seizes supplies that will sustain their fight for weeks. But the reprisal comes swiftly. The next day, German forces descend upon the nearby villages, burning homes, taking hostages, and executing those caught aiding the resistance. Orlik watches from the forest edge, his heart heavy with grief, yet steeled by resolve. He knows every action carries risk, but the alternative inaction is the surrender of his country. He moves tirelessly from village to village, teaching villagers how to survive, warning them of patrols, and establishing secret caches of food, weapons, and medical supplies. Each night, he documents enemy movements, reporting to the wider underground network, while always remaining just beyond the reach of capture. As winter sets in, the landscape transforms. Snow blankets the forest, muting footsteps, masking tracks, and providing both cover and danger. Orlik continues his missions, moving silently through deep snowdrifts, his breath fogging in the cold air, his movements calculated and deliberate. He sabotages supply lines, ambushes small patrols, and rescues civilians trapped by German search parties. Each successful strike strengthens the morale of the resistance, yet the cost is ever present. Villages destroyed, families torn apart, comrades lost. Orlik bears the burden, knowing that every life he can save is a victory, and every setback a lesson for the next encounter. By early spring of 1941, Orlik's reputation has grown beyond the forests he stalks. Soldiers speak in hushed tones of the cockroach, who strikes without warning, disappears into the shadows, and emerges unscathed. The Germans redouble their efforts to capture him, setting traps, increasing patrols, and hunting his allies. Yet he adapts to every challenge. In one daring maneuver, he guides a small unit through enemy lines to sabotage a train carrying reinforcements and supplies. Explosions shatter the silence, debris scatters across frozen tracks, and the enemy is thrown into chaos. Orlik moves calmly among his men, coordinating their withdrawal, ensuring no one is left behind. His tactical mind as sharp as ever. Despite constant danger, Orlik takes moments to reflect. In the quiet hours before dawn, he remembers his victories with the TKS Tankette, the young German nobleman Victor IV Albrecht von Ratibor, and the small victories that made him a symbol of Polish defiance. He remembers the men of Sierakov, the townsfolk who hid him, the countless lives touched by his courage. These memories are his anchor, keeping him focused, keeping him human amidst the relentless machinery of war. But the war is not forgiving. One fateful evening, after weeks of evading patrols, Orlik's group is ambushed near a small village. German soldiers, tipped off by informants, surround them in the fading light. Gunfire erupts, smoke clouds the air, and Orlik fights fiercely, using every skill honed in years of combat. Despite their bravery, the overwhelming numbers force them to surrender. Orlik is captured, bound, and transported to a prison camp deep within enemy territory. Yet even in captivity, Orlik's spirit does not break. He observes, plans, and waits, learning the routines of guards, the weaknesses of the camp, and the opportunities for escape. Months pass. The seasons change. Winter gives way to spring. Snow melts into rain-soaked earth, and the forested hills beyond the camp promise freedom. Orlik seizes the moment, exploiting a lapse in security, slipping through fences, evading patrols, and disappearing into the surrounding countryside. The cockroach lives on. Back among the resistance, Orlik resumes his mission. He moves silently through villages and forests, reconnecting with allies, guiding new recruits, and striking against German positions with precision. Each action is measured, each risk calculated, each life valued. Over time, he becomes a living legend, the man who defied Panzers, survived ambushes, escaped captivity, and continued to fight when hope seemed lost. By the autumn of 1944, the war rages on. Yet Orlik's resolve never wavers. He witnesses the devastation around him, the burning villages, the suffering civilians, and the relentless advance of the enemy. And still, he moves forward, a shadow in the Polish countryside, embodying the courage and defiance of a nation under siege. Every battle fought, every life saved, every mission completed adds to the legacy of Edmund Roman Orlik, Poland's first tank ace, a man who would survive the horrors of war and carry the spirit of resistance into peace. As the winter of 1944 gives way to the thawing spring of 1945, the Polish countryside is scarred by months of relentless occupation, bombed villages, and shattered roads. Orlik moves like a ghost among the ruins, his mind sharpened by years of guerrilla warfare, his body conditioned by countless ambushes and narrow escapes. Every step is cautious, every movement deliberate. The Germans remain ever vigilant, patrolling the forests and countryside in search of the elusive cockroach, who has become a symbol of Polish defiance. Orlik knows that the coming months will determine the fate of countless innocents and the survival of the underground resistance. He coordinates with local partisans, passing coded messages, moving caches of food and ammunition, and sharing his knowledge of enemy tactics honed from his tank battles and skirmishes. Each mission is a high-stakes gamble, yet he moves with the precision of a master tactician, never losing sight of the lives he must protect. In the springtime mist, Orlik and a small band of fighters set up an ambush on a key road used by German supply convoys. Using his intimate knowledge of terrain, he positions his men among the trees and ruins, the scent of wet earth and moss clinging to their clothes. When the enemy convoy approaches, Orlik signals silently, and the attack begins. Explosions tear through vehicles, gunfire erupts in controlled bursts, and the Germans scramble in disarray. Orlik's experience allows him to anticipate their movements. He instructs his men to fall back at precise intervals, minimizing casualties while maximizing enemy losses. The convoy is destroyed, vital supplies seized, and Orlik's small group vanishes into the surrounding woods before reinforcements can arrive. This pattern repeats over the following weeks. Raids, ambushes, rescues, and sabotage. Each act a piece of a larger plan to slow the German advance and protect the civilian population. As the months pass, Orlik is drawn to Warsaw, where the heart of the resistance is preparing for a decisive stand against the occupiers. The city is a labyrinth of narrow streets, barricaded buildings, and shadowed alleys, perfect for a man like Orlik, whose knowledge of movement and surprise tactics is unmatched. Together with other partisans, he organizes defensive positions, coordinates supplies, and trains new recruits in ambush tactics and improvised armored vehicles. The Polish resistance, inspired by Orlik's courage and leadership, becomes more effective and confident with each engagement. Snipers pick off enemy officers, small squads disable vehicles, and the city becomes a living trap for the German forces, who are unprepared for the relentless creativity of Orlik and his comrades. Orlik's days blur together in a continuous cycle of planning, fighting, and evading capture. The winter snow turns to spring mud, and the relentless rain of early 1945 soaks uniforms, hides tracks, and muffles footsteps. Orlik moves through ruined neighborhoods, teaching villagers how to defend themselves, guiding fleeing families to safety, and collecting intelligence on enemy movements. Every action is calculated, yet carries immense risk. One misstep could cost lives. Yet the cockroach thrives in this environment, exploiting every weakness, striking with precision, and vanishing into the shadows before the Germans can respond. In late spring, Orlik participates in the defense of Warsaw during the height of the uprising. Buildings crumble under artillery fire, smoke fills the streets, and the air is thick with the acrid stench of burning wood and metal. Orlik directs small units to strategic positions, countering German advances with guerrilla tactics that frustrate the occupiers at every turn. He moves through cellars, hidden stairwells, and behind barricades, coordinating ambushes, directing snipers, and orchestrating small-scale attacks that inflict maximum damage while preserving the lives of civilians and resistance fighters. His actions delay the enemy, giving the uprising critical hours and days to reorganize, resupply, and continue the fight despite overwhelming odds. During one particularly harrowing night, Orlik's unit intercepts a German patrol moving through a ruined courtyard. Using the shadows as cover and the element of surprise, Orlik leads a strike that disables vehicles, neutralizes enemy soldiers, and allows a group of trapped civilians to escape. The firefight is brutal but brief. Orlik's tactical brilliance ensures minimal casualties among his own men, and the enemy is left stunned and disoriented. These moments, repeated across the city, build the legend of the cockroach, a phantom of the streets, a man capable of striking fear into the most seasoned German soldiers, all while preserving the lives of those he protects. By the summer of 1945, the war nears its end. The German forces are in retreat, weakened by years of attrition, resistance activity, and advancing Allied armies from the west. Orlik continues his missions, not for glory, but to protect civilians, to sabotage remaining enemy positions, and to ensure that when the fighting stops, Poland will emerge with a surviving network of trained fighters capable of defending their communities. He guides refugees, distributes food, and dismantles remaining pockets of resistance to German control. Each act is a careful balance between aggression and protection, and Orlik performs it flawlessly, relying on every lesson learned from his tank battles, ambushes, and survival in enemy territory. Orlik is eventually captured once more, but his previous experience with evasion and survival allows him to escape under cover of darkness. Moving with uncanny precision, he disappears into forests, back into the cities, and among the people he has spent years defending. He witnesses the liberation of Poland by Allied forces, sees the retreat of the Germans, and experiences a bittersweet victory. His country is free, yet the cost has been immense, and the scars of war are everywhere. The fields, forests, and towns bear silent testimony to the sacrifices made. In the post-war years, Orlik turns his focus to rebuilding, channeling the discipline, strategic thinking, and creativity that once served in combat into architecture and design. He enrolls in the Academy of Fine Arts in Łódź, completing his degree while quietly reflecting on the war, the friends lost, and the victories won against overwhelming odds. Though the tanks, ambushes, and gunfire are behind him, Orlik carries the memory of every battle in his mind, ensuring that the lessons of courage, innovation, and resilience remain alive. He works alongside fellow veterans and notable figures such as Władysław Stremiński, blending the world of war experience with artistic creativity, leaving a mark not only in history, but also in culture. Edmund Roman Orlik passes away on the 8th of April, 1982, leaving behind a legacy that extends beyond his heroic deeds on the battlefield. He is remembered not just as Poland's first tank ace and the man who defied superior enemy forces with unmatched skill and courage, but also as a symbol of resilience, leadership, and ingenuity. His story continues to inspire generations, a testament to the strength of human will, the power of strategy, and the unwavering determination of a man who refused to be defeated, even when the odds were impossibly stacked against him. The late summer of 1939 had barely begun to settle over Poland when Edmund Roman Orlik found himself again in the thick of the fighting, now deeper in the Polish countryside and closer to the front lines that would soon be overwhelmed by the mechanized German forces. The fields were already scarred by tracks of invading armor, the villages abandoned, and the air heavy with the scent of smoke and fear. Orlik and his tankettes moved quietly through overgrown paths, every bend, tree line, and ruined building a potential ambush site. The TKS tankettes, though small, had proven their worth, and Orlik relied on their mobility and the precision of his 20mm autocannon to strike quickly and vanish before the enemy could respond. Each engagement was a test of nerves, strategy, and timing, A single miscalculation could mean the destruction of the tankette and the death of its crew. Orlik's mind worked constantly, calculating angles, distances, and enemy positions, blending instinct and experience as he prepared for the inevitable encounters. In these days, he became more than a soldier. He became a symbol, a phantom that haunted the advancing German forces. He coordinated with scattered units, sharing intelligence, planning raids, and ensuring that the small victories destroyed vehicles, ambushed convoys, and delayed enemy advances added to the larger effort of defending Polish territory. As September deepened into October, Orlik participated in a series of engagements near Sieraków, where the German forces, confident in their superior numbers and armored vehicles, were caught off guard by the unexpected ferocity and ingenuity of the Polish defenders. Orlik led his tankettes in daring attacks, striking from hidden positions, targeting vulnerable points, and retreating into cover before the Germans could organize counterattacks. In one engagement, he coordinated a feint with infantry, drawing the German armor into an exposed position, then unleashed precise fire that disabled multiple vehicles in moments. His actions not only inflicted significant material losses on the enemy, but also inspired the local population and resistance fighters, who began to see that bravery, skill, and clever tactics could offset the overwhelming power of the invaders. The nights were filled with reports of destroyed convoys and burning vehicles, while Orlik and his men moved silently through the darkness, avoiding patrols and ensuring their survival for the next day's operations. By late October, as the harsh winds of early winter began to bite, Orlik's efforts shifted toward protecting strategic towns and key communication routes. He trained new recruits in ambush tactics and rapid maneuvers, emphasizing stealth, coordination, and the use of the landscape to their advantage. Each lesson was critical. Inexperienced soldiers could not survive prolonged encounters with the well-equipped Germans without guidance. Orlik personally led several attacks, demonstrating the techniques and strategies necessary for survival. The small tankettes, now nicknamed the Cockroaches by both allies and enemies, moved through the countryside with unparalleled speed and elusiveness, striking where least expected. Orlik's reputation grew, his presence alone a morale booster for fellow soldiers and a source of dread for the German commanders. He became a master of psychological warfare, as well as tactics, his actions creating the illusion of larger forces, striking fear into the enemy, and buying precious time for the remaining Polish units to regroup and reorganize. As the year progressed toward the end of 1939, Orlik continued his relentless defense, participating in the final stand in Warsaw before the city fell. His tankettes darted between rubble-strewn streets, supporting infantry, ambushing convoys, and disrupting enemy movements with precise, devastating fire. The battles were chaotic, brutal, and exhausting, yet Orlik's calm under pressure, experience with armored warfare, and ability to anticipate enemy maneuvers allowed him to inflict significant damage while preserving as many lives as possible. Civilians, Soldiers and resistance fighters alike were inspired by his courage and ingenuity, seeing in him a figure who refused to surrender even when defeat seemed inevitable. After the surrender of Warsaw, Orlik refused to accept captivity quietly. He joined the underground resistance, using his knowledge of German tactics, terrain, and armored vehicles to organize sabotage missions, guide fellow fighters, and maintain the morale of those still resisting occupation.